Hi, my name is John Hemsworth. I'm an architect. We're based here in Vancouver. I have a small practice kind of focused on mass timber and high performance buildings. I'm a graduate of this program. This is my third studio that I've had a chance to lead. So let's just jump right in. Again, we're based here. We've been very fortunate in our practice to work with a number of First Nations. And one of the projects we're going to kind of like set up for the studio will actually be dealing with a Wee-Wee-Cum, a nation out of Campbell River. So this is a very important part of our learning as we move forward. So, oops, of course. I'm gonna try to do this in one take, so any mistakes will be into it. We'll be here forever. Our practice again is small. We're based in Vancouver, but we kind of really try to find the kind of balance between a kind of quality of space for building and a natural setting. This is a BC Passive House factory in Pemberton was one of our first projects. The idea behind the building was to kind of create a character and a quality of space that would be, delightful for the people working there. A lot of these industrial buildings are basically black boxes. So very simple moves, mass timber construction. It was prefabricated, the building, but we carried this clear story all the way around to let daylight in, but also to trace the days and the seasons and have offer some views out of the building. There is also an addition that we did during COVID. Again, different kind of conversation with this. This was more about how do you kind of present this company as a growing and more modern company versus the kind of like more of the traditional construction shell that they had done for the first building. They've kind of stepped up their work. We'll also be visiting them in early September, so we can kind of talk about it then. But it's a very interesting company. They prefabricate buildings, build them to passive house standard, and then erect them in a number of days. And I'll show you a project that we worked on. I won't go too deep into this stuff, but it's an idea of kind of where we're coming from, I guess, which will have a definitely impact on where we're going with the work. This is a project at the foot of Lonsdale. It's a passive house, three-story mixed-use building. There's a restaurant now on the ground floor and two floors of offices above. Uh, Again, some of the kind of challenges with this was how do you build this out of mass timber to high performance like passive house, and at the same time kind of utilize and exploit the characteristics of the mass timber. And at the same time participate in the kind of publicity of the street here that's being converted into a kind of walkway, the Polygon Pacow Gallery across the street. The benefit of this was a very tight site, and because of the prefabrication, the digital twinning we did, the main building was erected in about 10 days. So at some point we can show videos of that, I guess. And this is another large project for us. This is the Upper Skinner Recreation Center. This is in Hazelton, which is in northern BC. So if you were kind of moving from on the North Highway between Terrace and you ran into a moose, I guess, in the middle of nowhere, this is kind of where it is. There was an existing building, existing arena here that needed to be replaced, and it's quite a crazy story. But this building represents more than just an ice hockey rink and a gymnasium. It is the community refers to it as the heart of the Hazelton. So there's a social and community network and optimization and kind of embracement of the design right from the beginning and how we can do this. And then the building itself, again, was prefabricated. It was erected using local labor, which is just another metric of sustainability. So not just low carbon or kind of better energy performance, but a way of kind of building capacity within this northern remote community. We were very lucky to work on it. It's an important part of our trajectory as well too. And the lessons are learning from one project to the next start to be kind of accumulating. We think that like a project like this actually sets us up for kind of thinking about other public buildings and how we engage with them and how we have to think about them. So this idea of public space has become more and more important in our work, and not just in the kind of larger commercial or institutional buildings. We kind of start to think about it kind of in everything we're doing. So, for example, right now we're working on the new museum in Whistler and their archive, which is a place in a small pocket park here behind the Whistler Library. Um, and we work almost exclusively in physical model. Obviously, we're doing digital twinning as well too, but this is kind of where we start to play out what the opportunities are for the building, and start to think about this ideas of public space. So, how does this all work? So when we think about kind of public space and buildings, there's a kind of traditional idea of kind of what the building is or how people understand the iconography of it. But we were very kind of, inspired by different projects. Ones like the Allied Works, Wheaton Kennedy in Portland, where they've taken this kind of central room. This is a renovation project. I'm sure you're aware of it. And then it gets turned into a public space for different type of events. It becomes a social space for people. This is kind of an important piece for us because this, what I'm showing you here, is actually a screenshot from a streamed lecture series from Stanford in 2021 with Brad Clubfield. And kind of the questions that he was asking are, what role can architecture play in the idea of a publicity? Can our buildings offer more than just a functional solution, or an objectification of a client's ambitions? And more importantly, how do these buildings participate in the exchange between people? And when he said that, I was like, wait a second, I know this stuff. I've heard of this before. And when I was a student, you can see I was quite influenced by the work of George Bard in this book, The Space of Appearance. George, I never met him, but he, I think, was a dean at U of T for a while. And the book talks about the proposed, like the rejection of kind of modern and postmodern reductive concepts of publicness. They could be replaced with a large and diverse enough imagining of publicities to hold the complexities of contemporary life. That work's heavily influenced by Anna Haran. I found when I read it, it was a relief. It was this idea that we could kind of carve out moments in buildings and have anticipated and unanticipated and collective and intimate exchanges with people. And that seemed to me to be more kind of aligned with our thinking, or at least my thinking at the time. And so this is a project that we'll visit on our little field trip, but this is a factory that we did in Squamish. And it was nice to kind of realize that we're kind of moving along the same path. Obviously, we're big fans of Allied Works, and not drawing a direct comparison to the scale of work. But when we started looking at this project, basically it's a production house, right? They build high-end furniture, really amazing people. But we started thinking about like how we can kind of go from that, again, black box into kind of letting people come in and see what's going on in the building and let people go out and engage with a different type of publicity. But more importantly, when we got the brief, there was a request for a cafe on the ground floor, just a little coffee place. And so we kind of reimagined that and thought, well, maybe it shouldn't be just a place. Maybe it could be a place where all these makers come together, because the top floor of this building is like independently rented out to kind of other makers. The client was trying to create a space for people to come together, who were kind of, maybe through COVID, were moving out of the city, but a place where people of like mind and ingenuity and innovation in construction and manufacturing could come together. So we thought, maybe let's move that deck, or not the deck, let's move the cafe to a kind of shared collective space on the roof. And so we inverted the building, which made the kind of whole sequencing of the building different than a normal factory. So you kind of come up this, long staircase, filled with daylight, and land at this kind of shared space at the top of the building, which then enters into this, extremely amazing, surrounding. So again, it's the idea of tapping into the kind of publicity of the building and different ways of thinking about it, but also into kind of baking it into the site. And I'm just adding that picture because I like it. So at the same time we've been doing this, is that, we've been kind of more and more invested in the idea of the wood culture in Canada, and British Columbia is in a very incredible spot in the development in both Canadian wood culture, especially mass timber construction, and also in North America as well too. So we're in a really hotbed of it. Obviously, there's the long, storied history of the Indigenous kind of use of wood, not well, you could be, it's like timber, but not in a mass timber way, but still kind of a very clean and clear cultural use, which is obviously an influence when it comes around the idea of kind of what the imaginings of a building might be. Then there's the actual production and harvest. There's a huge history in BC. This is a picture from a tree. I grew up in Nova Scotia where the trees are small because the Atlantic is mean, whereas the Pacific here seems to grow much bigger trees. And this is from the Vancouver Harbor. They were exporting, they're called British Columbia toothpicks. I always found this a fascinating photo. They're 60-foot long, 3 foot by 3 foot square Douglas fir trees coming out of the forest here. Now, obviously, that type of kind of taking those type of trees out of the forest isn't something that's, is manageable today. But you just get the idea of how this city was actually built. And if you go down to Gastown, there are a number of buildings that are built mass timber, like heavy timber, structural frames, and then just kind of clad. So we have a long history of it here. But at the same time, there's this idea of sustainability, which has become more, I guess, in vogue, but more important than just a kind of fad to deal with as we kind of approach options of how we're going to mitigate climate change. In AU earlier, a couple months ago, Jim Taggart wrote an essay and referenced constructive environmentalism, which is a balance between sustainable forest management, building with wood whenever possible, and the mitigation of climate change. And Canada is a leader in this right now, I believe, according to Jim's work. 50% of all of the kind of third-party certified sustainable forests actually reside here in Canada. Now, obviously, the use of mass timber is biased by this. If there isn't a forest management practice in place, then the production doesn't work. Well, it's not meeting its climate and objectives for sure. So, all that being said, what are we going to do for the studio, which is really what probably you're the most interested in? So, what we find is that the most important things to us is the idea of the means of construction, how are buildings actually put together, not kind of an application of idea after the fact, but how are they really conceived from a very simple layer, from a very simple approach. And we've been very lucky to work with a lot of great builders, which is a big piece of kind of learning this stuff. And at the same time, as architects, think about the quality of space. And so this kind of, I guess, intersection between these two things, because if we're really going to talk about kind of making buildings for the public and making places for people to meet and people to exchange, one of the ways to gravitate that is to actually create spaces that can be meaningful and anticipate habitation versus just be functional plans. We're not driven by that at all. We really try to think about what the space is and its relationship to its site, but talk about the ideas of light and tracing. So in the studio, we will kind of mimic our approach, and we work a lot with physical models, little sketch models. We do them quick and fast and iterate through them. This is for a skier's chapel on Whistler Mountain. So just in the design phase, but it's not representational models. It's not for, I mean, we do show them to clients. It's not a way of kind of transmitting a final narrative. It's a way of exploring the opportunities yourself. We also think that while we're fully versed digitally, the physical models are easier for other people to participate in than digital. So it's a balance, but the studio will definitely be focused on kind of physical modeling. And then the digital modeling is a way to kind of understand the structural inevitabilities and how that all works too. So there's kind of a balance between the two things. Drawing, and again, drawing not just as a representational tool, but as a tool of investigation, a generative tool to kind of understand problems and kind of be able to work through them. And drawing at scale is an important skill set that has become harder and harder to trace as we've moved deeper and deeper into digital kind of BIM modeling, where you're drawing the building in its entirety. Scaling as you draw is an important way of understanding the buildings at certain levels. And so we'll talk about that a lot in the studio. And then again, tying it to its site. So the idea will be to kind of take a problem, to quickly iterate through formal options and formal kind of opportunities and formal challenges. And by formal, I mean just the physical reality of it, not in a necessarily a presentation way. But then we start to play with the ideas of if you want the quality of light, if you want the relationship with sight, it has to end up in these little sketch models. If it's not there, there's no way it's going to make it through the drawing process. So the studio will be based down. We're going to start off with precedent studies where we'll be not doing book reports on buildings, but we'll actually be physically modeling kind of options to look at both their structural systems and how they are kind of offering invitation to different publics or different publicities, how we'll go. And I think at this point for the precedent studies, we'll work in groups of two, and we'll kind of mix the projects that we're looking at and see what kind of comes out of it. We're looking at doing a sea to sky day trip. We've done this in the past, so we kind of drive up to Pemberton, take a look and get to meet them, talk about prefabrication. We'll come back to Whistler, we visit the Packhouse Gallery. It's not the Packhouse Gallery, but you know what I mean, and kind of talk about different publicities and how that might be understood. We will also then go down to Squamish and look at the Leon Lebanese factory, and then our first project will be a small project, kind of a public infrastructure piece, public amenity maybe is closer to it, and that's based in Squamish. So we'll visit the site there again. And the reason I kind of have set the studio up like this is to go from one project to another is the idea of kind of not spending too long kind of contemplating the work, contemplating what it might be, but actually think about it through the process of making. So the modeling and the iteration and the evaluation, what we'll kind of focus our time and our attention on. So the first project will run for about 4 weeks, and there's some little flexibility on this. Turning the corner on the way home, we'll be I'll bring in a couple of people to talk about kind of wood culture and how that works, and we'll have some readings to do. And then the large project is actually a project that well, it's the nation we're working with. So it's the Wew'wet'kum Nation based out of Campbell River. Very interesting group of people, and we've been lucky enough to be working on them on our Marine Science Center in Campbell River. However, we're going to break that kind of the program down and kind of make it a little less complicated and then do a hypothetical project here. They've offered to host us overnight. So that'll be an overnight trip. It's about a 4 or 5 hour drive there. We'll spend the night, meet the site, and then come back the next day. Dates are flexible on that. And then that'll be the final project. My way of thinking about this is that the things that we're talking about and what we're exploring will carry through all of these projects. And ideally, in a perfect world, it gives you a kind of methodology of maybe presenting or at least exploring your thesis work in your GP2 projects before you go. For me, as a student in the program, this was easily the most valuable things that we were exposed to and learned. So the projects, the space of appearance and lessons in mass appeal. I'm really kind of excited about it, not for just the reasons of kind of what it'll offer you, but what it offers us, and a chance to kind of take a moment and think about how this kind of positioning will influence our work as we move forward, and hopefully be very enjoyable for you as well too. I don't know how long that all took. I got through it in one run. So thanks. We look forward to talking to everybody. Enjoy well, I guess your summer will be over by the time you see this, but take care, and we'll talk soon. Thanks, bye.